So today we're going to complete another column on this table. So we're going to do the absolute value column. So the most basic absolute value function is y equals the absolute value of x. So we're going to see what each of these transformations looks like in an absolute value equation instead of just in function notation. So remember that we talked about function notation was for left one was f of x plus 1. And remember how we discussed it was inside the parentheses? Well, in absolute value, it's also inside, but it's inside the absolute value. So it looks like this. It's x plus 1 inside the absolute value. So on the horizontal translation, right 2, it's like this one where it was x minus 2 inside the parentheses. So it's still inside, but this time it's inside the absolute value. So just like how right was minus, it's still minus, it's just on the inside. So it looks exactly the same. We're just seeing how to do function notation as absolute value. So here we had a vertical translation of down 3, and we saw it as a minus 3 outside the parentheses. So you have y equals the absolute value of x, and the minus 3 is outside the absolute value. So the vertical translation is also outside the absolute value, but it is plus 4. And then the reflections are exactly the same. How the negative was inside the parentheses, well, now it's inside the absolute value. Or if it was outside the parentheses or outside the f of x, it's outside the absolute value like this. So we're taking the same knowledge we learned yesterday and we're applying it to the form of absolute value. All right, so let's do the vertical stretches and shrinks. If you recall, the vertical stretch by 5 was multiplying by 5 outside the parentheses or outside the f of x. So this is the 5 is multiplying just right in front of the absolute value, but not inside the absolute value bars. Same thing, the 1/6 is multiplying in front of the absolute value bars. Now on horizontal, remember that we use the reciprocal, and so we still use the reciprocal of 7, so we still use 1 over 7, and it's still inside the absolute value bars with the x. So horizontal is inside, vertical is outside. So horizontal shrink of 1/8, we use the reciprocal, and it goes inside the absolute value bars. So hopefully you can kind of see the commonalities between being inside the parentheses of f of x and inside the absolute value bars versus outside the f of x and outside the absolute value bars. All the rules remain the same. We're just looking at how you do this with absolute value. So go back, rewatch parts of the video, pause if you need to, and make sure you have this column filled out so that in our next class we can continue to learn about how all the changes relate to the absolute value graph.